The Space Shuttle Challenger is destroyed just a little more than 1 minute after liftoff.
1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical
All
miles.
7 astronauts on board are killed.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Tonight, reporting from Washington.
It is the worst disaster in the history of the American space program, and President Reagan has declared a week of mourning for the 7 astronauts, 5 men and 2 women, who lost their lives on their way into space this morning. Now, we know that many of you have heard the news many hours ago and may even have seen some of our extended coverage this afternoon. But many others of you, we surmise, have been at work, and thus we're going to spend virtually our entire broadcast this evening on what is not only a crushingly sad day for families, friends, and colleagues of the astronauts, but also an enormous shock to the manned space program, which before today had gone so well. Never before have American lives been lost in flight. We will try to answer many of your questions, but as of this evening, many questions remain unanswered. We begin at Cape Canaveral with ABC's John Quinones.
They gathered for what turned out to be their last meal at 6:48 this morning, the ceremonial breakfast. For months, they had trained together. Astronaut Ellison Onizuka from Hawaii, the star of this mission, New Hampshire schoolteacher Krista McAuliffe, mission commander Dick Scobie, pilot Michael Smith, astronauts Judith Resnick and Ronald McNair, and payload specialist Gregory Jarvis. After 3 days of delays, they appeared tired, but quickly rejuvenated by applause as they headed for the launch pad.
Scobie, followed by mission specialist Judy Resnick, Ron McNair, and pilot Mike Smith, followed by Krista McAuliffe, teacher in space, Ellison Onizuka, and payload specialist Greg Jarvis.
Final preparations before liftoff. The ground crew gives McAuliffe an apple for the teacher, and wishes of good luck. Initially, liftoff was scheduled for 9:38 this morning, but again there were problems. A hard freeze overnight left ice on the launch pad, a 2-hour delay, and then NASA discovers a faulty fire detector on board the shuttle, another hour's delay while it's replaced. Finally, the liftoff was set for 11:38. A crowd of some 500 spectators, including 18 visiting school children from McAuliffe's hometown of Concord, New Hampshire, waited anxiously and then counted down. The liftoff appeared flawless. The spectators, including Krista McAuliffe's parents, Grace and Edward Corrigan, watched proudly through tears of joy. 65 seconds into flight, NASA Control orders Commander Scobie to go to full power.
Challenger, go with throttle up. Challenger, go with throttle up.
Suddenly, an explosion.
Flight controllers here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction.
NASA loses all communication with Challenger, but the crowd still does not realize that something's gone wrong. Within seconds, Challenger disintegrates.
We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded.
For the spectators and Krista McAuliffe's parents, joy turns to confusion, worry, and a realization of tragedy. The $1.2 billion spaceship, its 7 crew members, and their satellite payload disappear.
I thought the flight was going fine. And then I heard them say, major malfunction. And then the person beside me said, it's exploded. And it was... I couldn't speak. It was...
Within minutes, emergency rescue teams parachuted in, converging on a search area 18 miles east of Cape Canaveral.
Debris continued to fall for 50 minutes and more, and obviously you can't send aircraft and ships into an area where debris is falling, where they themselves may be endangered.
Late this afternoon, after 6 hours of searching, NASA reports they found no survivors.
These searches have not revealed any evidence that the crew of Challenger survived.
Tonight, NASA and Cape Canaveral are in mourning. Tonight at Cape Canaveral, Vice President George Bush, accompanied by Senators Jake Garn and John Glenn, both former astronauts, expressed the nation's condolences to the families of the astronauts. Bush had a special message for American school children.
You must try to understand that spirit, bravery, and commitment are what make not only the space program, but all of life worthwhile. We must never, as people in our daily lives or as a nation, stop exploring, stop hoping, stop discovering. We must press on.
John Quinones, ABC News, Cape Canaveral.
This whole concept of a teacher in space has been important to the country, but especially to the children, as the Vice President alluded ever since President Reagan in 1984 suggested there be a teacher in space. It was going to be a very big day in Krista McAuliffe's hometown of Concord, New Hampshire, and especially at the high school where she taught. ABC's Jay Shadler was there.
Krista McAuliffe's students and friends at Concord High School were ready to watch a dream come true this morning. Instead, they became witnesses to a nightmare.
2, 1, and liftoff.
In the moments after the launch, their celebrations drowned out the first news of the tragedy. But the clamor turned to quiet as this picture burned itself into their memories.
Reports from the flight dynamics officer indicate that the vehicle apparently exploded and that impact in the water.
Some people were covering their eyes, and some people were just watching the TV set with a blank look on their face.
It was really quite dramatic. At first, you know, everyone was really happy, all these smiles, and then suddenly you saw a lot of people crying in the halls, and it was really pretty sad.
Just moments before, Eileen O'Hara, Krista McAuliffe's good friend and classroom substitute, had shared this haunting sentiment with a local reporter.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to watch because I want her to be safe and I want her to have fun.
Now the public celebration had turned into private mourning and shock.
She was a part of us. She was part of a family. And it's like if your sister or brother died, she'll be remembered. It was the hell. It's the hell.
Though Krista McAuliffe's students and friends have known her here in Concord for years, she became known to the nation when she decided to pursue her dreams. Those dreams had been sparked by President Reagan's announcement a year ago for a teacher astronaut. The search for that history maker brought 11,000 applications, but only one made the final grade.
And the winner, the teacher who will be going into space, Krista McAuliffe.
From the outset, she approached this mission and her training with the same ideals she brought to the classroom.
Well, it was a challenge, and it was something that I always ask my students, you know, to go and seek whatever they feel they can do and reach a little higher.
She wore her spirit on her face, and her hometown loved it. Now they are remembering it. A special counselor will be brought to Concord High tomorrow to help students begin dealing with their loss. But perhaps Krista McAuliffe's own words echo the best advice.
To follow your instincts and go for your dreams, and I hope they achieve that.
Jay Shadler, ABC News, Concord, New Hampshire.
When Challenger was 10 miles up and 18 miles downrange and that explosion occurred, we all knew a great deal about Krista McAuliffe, but we've become so accustomed to the shuttle going up and coming down now that the other astronauts on board were just not as well known to us. Well, they are today, and ABC's Stone Phillips has been looking at them.
When they posed, it was like a portrait of America. Men and women, war veterans and first-time astronauts, parents, and even a classical pianist. Their commander was Francis Scobie, age 46, from Washington State, an astronaut after 22 years in the Air Force. This was his second shuttle mission. Second in command, pilot Michael Smith, age 40, a decorated Navy pilot from North Carolina. Like Scobie, he'd seen combat in Vietnam and trained as a test pilot. And like the commander, he was a husband and father. This was Smith's first shuttle mission. Mission specialist Ellison Onizuka was the first Hawaiian astronaut who believed in the benefits of the space program.
There are a lot of outcomes from these projects which will affect both our society and the rest of the world.
Onizuka is survived by his wife and 2 daughters. 36-year-old mission specialist Judy Resnick was a shuttle veteran, her assignment to operate the shuttle's mechanical arm. She was on board the shuttle Discovery in 1984 when a launch was aborted after the engines had fired. Gregory Jarvis was on board to conduct tests on the effects of weightlessness on liquids carried in tanks. Born in Detroit, trained as an Air Force satellite engineer, Jarvis was on his first shuttle mission. Ronald McNair, age 36, from South Carolina, brought a background in physics and laser technology to the shuttle program. This was the second trip to space for a husband and father who saw space travel as a calling for mankind.
I see it as something that we must do, and I see it as something that's part of man's nature to explore.
These six, along with Krista McAuliffe, the first teacher in space, now a tragic page in NASA history. Stone Phillips, ABC News.
When we come back, we'll try to analyze what happened. It isn't easy. Throughout the many hours today before NASA officials came out at Cape Canaveral and made an official statement, there was an incredible anxiety that many people in the nation seemed to feel about getting an answer to what had really happened. Well, the real answer may be a very long time in coming, but ABC's Lynn Scher, who covers space for us on a regular basis and has for a long time, is with us tonight in our Los Angeles bureau. Lynn?
Well, Peter, all the NASA experts, those review boards, are certainly going to check all the data they can gather, and they are going to be looking at all the pictures they can see. And those are the exact same pictures that we have been looking at also, and we've been taking a closer look at those last tragic moments. Here you see what they call a nominal ascent. All those words, textbook, picture perfect, and then suddenly a tiny flame just where the fuel lines go from the big external tank into Challenger itself. On the left, with the arrow, a plume where gases from the tank are forming, obviously feeding the fire. Now you will see the flame creeping up the external tank in between the tank and the shuttle itself. This is the beginning of the huge, catastrophic explosion that absolutely engulfed the entire system. You will see a second explosion right at the top of that big external tank. This is obviously what put the entire thing into flames and probably what destroyed the shuttle almost instantly. Now for a moment the smoke clears and we see emerging apparently the top of Challenger. We think this is the last picture we have ever seen of Challenger before it fell to the sea with its precious cargo. And as the sequence is going to continue, you will see that mammoth, horrible explosion on the right. One of the solid rocket boosters split away now from the tank and the shuttle itself. These boosters cannot be controlled once they're lit, so it has obviously gone off on its own into the wrong place, but it does not appear, I repeat, appear from what we can see that it was the cause of the explosion or that anything happened to it. So that's the sequence. We can see that. We can try to understand it. What we don't know is why it happened, and that's what we now need to find out. Peter?
Lynn, thank you very much. Joining us tonight from Houston is the former astronaut Gene Cernan from the Apollo program, and he also has seen this same sequence repeated many times throughout the day. Gene, I know your reluctance to speculate and share it with you, but do you see anything in those pictures which give us a clue?
I think the analysis Lynn presented, the only one we have to work with because, we don't have access to the data, and it would take even us, if we had the time, weeks and weeks to analyze it. But just simply from the pictures, it sounded to me like her analysis, as it was portrayed, has got some substance to it. We can't answer why. We don't know why. We don't know why it might have happened, but from those pictures we might very well be able to see what happened. Remember that tank that she referred to is carrying thousands and thousands of pounds of liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen. Hydrogen is a propellant. It burns, it explodes. Liquid oxygen is the oxidizer, like air, which supports the fire, which allows it to burn. And if you burn it as a controlled substance, if you meter it and you burn them together properly like you do in the engines, it's an ally. But when you allow them to join in an uncontrolled atmosphere, what can happen did happen.
Gene, very quickly, I'm afraid, but can you tell us why there was no escape mechanism on board today?
Well, the shuttle was designed early with ejection seats, so that if something occurred, the crew in its first 3 or 4 flights could get out. It was a test program. The evolution of the shuttle under an operational vehicle took those seats out. The only escape mechanism, as it was planned, was that the shuttle itself, with an impending problem, one you could see coming, could get off those tanks, turn around, and land back at Kennedy Space Center. Obviously, they did not have time for that because they didn't know the catastrophe was occurring.
Gene Cernan, thank you very much from Houston, and Lynn Scher from Los Angeles. When we come back, we'll have the reaction from the President and from Congress. In official Washington today, the reaction has been much the same as anywhere else in the country. Shock and disbelief and sorrow. The President took the unprecedented step of postponing the State of the Union message, which he was due to give to Congress tonight. He will give it next week. He did go on television late this afternoon to comfort the nation. ABC Sam Donaldson at the White House.
The flag was lowered at the White House and other government buildings late this afternoon as President Reagan led the nation in mourning with a short address from the Oval Office.
Nancy and I are pained to the core by the tragedy of the Shuttle Challenger. We know we share this pain with all of the people of our country. This is truly a national loss.
The day began with the president conferring with congressional leaders about his State of the Union message scheduled for delivery tonight. When he heard the news of the shuttle disaster, his first thought was to go ahead with it. You can't stop governing the nation, Mr. Reagan told a group of reporters. But as the president and his advisors kept watching the television replays of the explosion and the reactions of relatives, school children, and others, Mr. Reagan changed his mind.
The president thought it was entirely appropriate that his State of the Union be deferred.
The State of the Union speech was put off until next Tuesday. Vice President Bush was dispatched to Cape Canaveral to express the president's concern to people there. And Mr. Reagan, in his own remarks, tried to explain to the school children who had watched the explosion, he said, why such things happen.
I know it's hard to understand, but sometimes painful things like this happen. It's all part of the process of exploration and discovery. It's all part of taking a chance and expanding man's horizons. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave.
This was to have been another night of triumph for the president, who had planned to tell the Congress and the nation how good things are in the country. But the shuttle disaster has changed all that. Officials here are shaken by the loss and by the fact it has happened on Mr. Reagan's watch. Sam Donaldson, ABC News, the White House.
This is Britt Hume. Officials usually keep emotions under control in Washington, but today there was no hiding them.
Well, it's very difficult for me to talk about it because these were my friends.
It's been an amazingly successful series of triumphs through the years. But it also is fraught with the possibility of tragedy, and that's what we came up against today.
There were some calls to rein in NASA.
I think that some limit has to be placed on the PR that NASA indulges in.
I think the policy of sending civilians into space obviously had better be reevaluated.
But that seemed a minority sentiment.
Let us remember, in silent prayer, those who were involved in the spacecraft shuttle accident just a few minutes ago.
Now their names become history. But that drive of the human spirit will not die. In that flash of fire, it will be reborn again, and other young men and young women who will read about them and learn.
Florida Congressman Nelson, who returned aboard the shuttle Columbia just last week, had lost none of his enthusiasm.
This is part of what you understand is part of the risk that you're taking. Of course I would go again, even if it were tomorrow.
I would go again tomorrow. If NASA would let me go, I would go again.
Unlike another costly and dangerous program, the military, the space program has always been popular here, seeming to represent something Americans like to think is theirs, the future. This tragedy may shake that feeling, but if today's reactions are a guide, not for long. Britt Hume, ABC News, on Capitol Hill.
Well, this tragedy has had repercussions well beyond the borders of the United States. When we come back. As ABC's Bill Blakemore now makes clear, there was shock and grief all across the country today and all around the world.
That poor teacher, you just think everything is just down pat, and then something like this happens. I feel awful.
The feeling that you get, that cold feeling all over, that only happens maybe 5 times in your lifetime.
Space shuttle explodes, get it right now.
At midday, word flashed between people everywhere across the country.
Didn't you know about it? Yeah, the space shuttle blew up this morning.
Oh, yeah. I think it's very tragic. I think it's the most tragic thing since the death of Kennedy himself.
And as with Kennedy's death, people remember where they were the moment they heard.
I think I was in an elevator in Midtown Manhattan, and somebody said the shuttle just came down.
But it was in those schoolrooms around the country.
We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded. My director confirms that. We are looking at checking with the recovery forces to see what can be done at this point.
Can we get the cameras?
Pilot Mike Smith, Commander Dick Scobie,
The kids invited almost as if to a party for a live classroom lesson from space turned suddenly into a lesson in mortality.
You think that there's so much technology that, you know, they could keep things like this from happening.
I was horrified. I didn't think that would happen. I didn't think that would happen.
The shock was immediately felt around the world. Within 30 minutes of the explosion, Soviet TV showed it. In the Frankfurt airport, travelers stopped in their tracks. Back in America, test pilot Chuck Yeager showed the professionals' attitude to danger.
You don't give an awful lot of thought to it because, number one, you can't do anything about it when it happens.
But for most of us today, there was no professional detachment, just the sudden finality of it.
It was just a nice liftoff, and then right out the clear blue sky, boom, it happened, and it just made me feel bad.
Bill Blakemore, ABC News.
It made us all feel bad. We'll be back in a moment. It really was largely because of the teacher, Krista McAuliffe. We can't recall a time since man set foot on the moon when much of the nation, and because it was so many children, were engaged in a particular mission. When President Reagan went on television this afternoon, he was talking not only to the children, but to all of us, trying to comfort a nation.
The crew of the Space Shuttle Challenger honored us for the manner in which they lived their lives. We will never forget them, nor the last time we saw them this morning, as they prepared for their journey and waved goodbye and slipped the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God.
Very often, but particularly today, this program seems inadequate to tell it all and to share it all. Later this evening on the full ABC network at 10 o'clock, 9 Central Time, we'll have a full hour special on today's tragedy, and then even later this evening on Nightline, Ted Koppel and his guests will go as deeply as one can on a day such as this into this tragedy. The death of 7 American astronauts and mourning across the land and around the world. That is our report on World News Tonight. I'm Peter Jennings. Good night.
My fellow Americans, yesterday we marked the 15th anniversary of the first manned landing on the moon. We all remember that great moment when Neil Armstrong said, "Tranquility Base here, the Eagle has landed." But that wasn't our last great moment in space. In fact, it's become increasingly clear that most of our great moments are ahead of us. For 25 years, we approached space with a certain amount of daring do. It was the last frontier, and we would be its first pioneers. Space seemed like a vast black desert, but now we're ready to make the desert bloom. I'm talking about opening space up to business, to private enterprise, opening space up to commerce and experimentation and development. Why? To improve the quality of life on Earth. We've learned in the past few years that in the zero gravity of space, it's possible to manufacture drugs and pharmaceuticals of a purity much greater than is possible on Earth, and in much greater quantities. The zero gravity of space is allowing us in the space shuttle and soon in a manned space station to experiment with new drugs and new cures for diseases. You have a friend or relative with diabetes? Some scientists believe that in space it's possible they may be able to produce a cure for diabetes within the next decade. In space, we also find new opportunities for important breakthroughs in cancer research. Now, cancer research is one of those phrases that to some people means we're still thinking and getting nowhere. But a number of scientists now believe that a cure for some types of cancer might be produced in space sometime in the not-too-distant future. That's not all. In space, we can manufacture crystals that have many times the yield and purity of those made on Earth. These will help maintain America's leadership in the computer industry. We can also develop new metals that are lighter and stronger than any we've ever known. So the promise and the potential are there. And private industry, private research groups, medical groups, and all sorts of businesses want to get up into space and invest. But it's very costly. It'll involve long-term investment, commitment, and imagination. For the past year now, our administration has been studying ways to encourage private investment and development, and we've come up with a number of new initiatives to achieve that goal. These initiatives don't involve a special interest treatment of any sort. What they come down to is a policy designed to do away with laws that inadvertently discriminate against companies that do business in space rather than on the ground. We also want to make sure these companies are not stymied by needless regulation. For example, the way the law is written now, products made in space might be subject to import tariffs because they weren't made in America. Well, we're going to change that. Another example, businesses which operate at home receive various kinds of tax incentives. But again, as the laws are written now, space products companies would not receive those incentives. We'll be looking at that too. Also, to encourage research and development, we've been working in partnership with industry and academia to expand basic research opportunities, achieve new breakthroughs, and give U.S. companies making space-age products a boost on the way to the marketplace. As our country moves into high-tech industries, space will be a big part of the future. As space-related businesses take off, the economy will benefit. Ultimately, it could well mean tens of thousands of jobs, billions of dollars in new foreign trade, and tens of billions of dollars added to the gross national product. Some of our new initiatives will be accomplished through executive order. Others will require congressional action. We're confident that these measures will win considerable support. I'm proud of our work in this area, of our ability to recognize what private companies have recognized, that we have cultivated space for the past 25 years, and now is the harvest time. Now is the time to reap the practical fruits of all that daring. You know, we've been hearing a lot lately from politicians who keep talking about how dark the future is. Well, I think the narrowness of their vision stems from a kind of blindness to the adventure that technology continues to offer us. Those folks have such a strangled sense of possibilities. But in space, the possibilities are endless. It's good news for all mankind and for our country. Until next week, thanks for listening. God bless you.
During the space age, we have increased the knowledge of our universe 1,000-fold.
But thou, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased.
And for people all over the world, I am sure that they too join with Americans in recognizing what an immense feat this is.
Apollyon.
Because of what you have done, the heavens have become a part of man's world.
Apollyon.
The long-term aspiration is to develop the technologies necessary to transport a large number of people and cargo to Mars in order to create a self-sustaining civilization there. And that's really why I started the company, was because it seemed as though
to create the possibility for life on other planets.
Yeah. Exactly.
So you decide you want to try and do this.
Can't just be like a handful of people, because that's obviously not going to create a self-sustaining civilization.
I tried so hard and got so far, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. I tried so hard and got so far, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. It starts with
And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with the rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God, and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him.
A friendly reminder to those who believe Jesus ascended into heaven. Pay attention to heaven at this time.
As for the beauty of his ornament, he set it in majesty, but they made the images of their abominations and of their detestable things therein. Therefore have I set it far from them, and I will give it into the hands of the strangers for a prey, and to the wicked of the earth for a spoil, and they shall pollute it, and they shall pollute it. My face will I turn also from them, and they shall pollute my secret place, for the robbers shall enter into it and defile it. Make a chain, for the land is full of bloody crimes, and the city is full of violence. Wherefore I will bring the worst of the heathen, and they shall possess their houses. I will also make the pomp of the strong to cease, and their holy places shall be defiled. Destruction cometh, and they shall seek peace, and there shall be none.
He bowed the heavens also, and came down, and darkness was under his feet. And he rode upon a cherub, and did fly, yea, he did fly upon the wings of the wind. He made darkness his secret place. He made darkness his secret place. His pavilion, round about him were dark waters, and thick clouds of the skies.
Daniel spake and said,
I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea, and four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. First was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. First was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. And behold, another beast, a second like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. And behold, another beast, a second like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. And behold, another beast, a second like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. And it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. How dare you pretend? How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. Live with the consequences. How dare you?
Okay, this is a 1996 space shuttle mission, STS-75. I wanted to show you some interesting footage. So this is a satellite, who cares what it's about, but it has a tether, and they were going to tether it from the shuttle on their mission when they were in orbit. So they do the thing, and they get it up there, and they start deploying it with this boom they have, and something happens as they deploy the actual satellite. There's a tether, you'll see here. There's a tether at the bottom of that that's kind of just holding it together there. Well, there you go, you see it there. As the tether extended out and out and out, it actually broke. And this is where I think some things are even being revealed now in 2018 with some of this old footage. Okay, there you see it breaking. Okay, now there's going to be several minutes of footage here following this that as this thing is floating away from them, they'll be talking too, so you can get something out of that. But they retract in the boom, because they lost it, and now they're just tracking it, and they're going to be filming it here from the top of the shuttle. So listen into what they say, and after the footage I will come back.
Again, this is a view of the satellite.
Well, if it had to break, it did it in the right place.
Commander Andy Allen reported earlier that the tether apparently broke inside the boom in Columbia's cargo bay, with only about 10 meters of tether left attached in the cargo bay.
We're going to downlink from camera A to you.
Columbia and the satellite now 77 nautical miles apart. Again, that call reporting that the crew can see the tether and see the satellite. It's beautiful. This view showing the satellite. Again, just moving into sunrise. 81 nautical miles now from Columbia.
You guys getting the image?
Franklin, we see a long line, a couple of star-like things, and a lot of things swimming in the foreground. Can you describe what you're seeing?
Well, the long line is a tether, and there's a little bit of debris that kind of flies with us, and it's illuminated by the sun at such low angle. So there's a lot of stray light, and it's getting washed out quickly, but Claude is trying to do a quick, good job here adjusting the cameras.
Copy that.
Again, that description by the crew, this is the tether in the satellite with approximately 12 miles of tether still attached to it. Columbia and the satellite now just passing over the west coast of northern Africa. The two spacecraft now 90 nautical miles apart. Controllers for the satellite did have communications with it during the close pass between Columbia and the satellite.
I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird.
This is Babylon, and these are fallen angels, or evil spirits, devils, and they're imprisoned up there where NASA is going.
For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues.
And beyond this chasm I saw a place, and it had neither the sky above it, nor the foundation of earth below it. There was no water on it, and no birds, but it was a desert place. And a terrible thing I saw there, 7 stars like great burning mountains, and like a spirit questioning me, the angels said, "This is the place of the end of heaven and earth. This is the prison for the stars of heaven and the host of heaven. This is the prison for the stars of heaven and the host of heaven. This is the prison for the stars of heaven and the host of heaven."
Babylon the Great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird.
And the stars which roll over the fire, these are the ones which transgressed the command of the Lord from the beginning of their rising, because they did not come out at their proper times. And he was angry with them, and bound them until the time of the consummation of their sin, in the year of mystery. And Uriel said to me, "The spirits of the angels who were promiscuous with women will stand here, and they, assuming many forms, made men unclean, and will lead men astray so that they sacrifice to demons as gods. And they will stand there until the great judgment, on which they will be judged, so that an end will be made of them. There was a great fire there, which burnt and blazed, and the place had no cleft reaching into the abyss, full of great pillars of fire, which were made to fall. Neither its extent nor its size could I see, nor could I see its source. Then I said, "How terrible this place is, and how painful to look at." Then Uriel, one of the holy angels, who was with me, answered me. He answered me and said to me, "Enoch, why do you have such fear and terror because of this terrible place, and before this pain?" And he said to me, "This place is the prison of the angels, and there they will be held forever."
And we have main engine cutoff. And stage separation has been confirmed. And you can see the first stage there flipping back. Use the nitrogen thrusters. And the boost back burn of that first stage. And we've entered the entry burn startup.
And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast.
This is a 25-second burn.
And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire, and burn her with fire, and burn her with fire. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of God shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which reigneth over the kings of the earth.
And landing burn has hit startup, and we have ignition.
And burn her with fire, and burn her with fire, and burn her with fire.
So the landing laser play in a few seconds. And we have touchdown.
And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born.
Go forth and descend through all the heavens, and thou wilt descend to the firmament, and that world, to the angel in Sheol thou wilt descend. Heavens, and thou wilt descend to the firmament, and that world, to the angel in Sheol thou wilt descend. Heavens, and thou wilt descend to the firmament, and that world, to the angel in Sheol thou wilt descend. And we ascended to the firmament, I and he, and there I saw Samael and his hosts, and there was great fighting therein, and the angels of Satan were envying one another. And we ascended to the firmament, I and he, and there I saw Samael and his hosts, and there was great fighting therein, and the angels of Satan were envying one another.
For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness to be For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment, not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment.
And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains unto darkness, unto the judgment of the great day. He hath reserved in everlasting chains. And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains unto darkness, unto the judgment of the great day.
But cast them down to hell.
Raging waves of the sea, foaming out their own shame. Wandering stars, wandering stars, to whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever. And the blackness of darkness forever. Wandering stars, to whom is reserved the blackness of darkness forever.
And the entire law of the stars will be closed to the sinners, and the thoughts of those who dwell upon the earth will go astray over them, and they will turn from all their ways and will go astray, and will think them gods.
Wandering stars.
And I saw a burning fire in what was in all the mountains, and I saw a place there beyond the great earth. There the waters gathered together. And I saw a deep chasm of the earth with pillars of heavenly fire, and I saw among them fiery pillars of heaven, which were falling, and as regards both height and depth they were immeasurable.
But cast them down to hell.
And beyond this chasm I saw a place, and it had neither the sky above it, nor the foundation of earth below it. There was no water on it, and no birds, but it was a desert place. And a terrible thing I saw there, 7 stars like great burning mountains.
Wandering stars.
And like a spirit questioning me, the angel said, This is the place of the end of heaven and earth. This is the prison for the stars of heaven and the host of heaven. And the stars which roll over the fire, these are the ones which transgressed the command of the Lord.
Wandering stars.
From the beginning of their rising, because they did not come out at their proper times. And he was angry with them, and bound them until the time of the consummation of their sin, in the year of mystery. And Uriel said to me, The spirits of the angels who were promiscuous with women will stand here.
Blackness of darkness.
And they, assuming many forms,
wandering stars,
made men unclean, and will lead men astray, so that they sacrifice to demons as gods.
Wandering stars.
And they will stand there until the great judgment, on which they will be judged, so that an end will be made of them.
Deep down in Louisiana, close to New Orleans, way back up in the woods among the evergreens, there stood a log cabin made of earth and wood, where lived a country boy named Johnny B. Good, who never ever learned to read or write so well, but he could play a guitar just like a ringing a bell. Go, go! Go, Johnny, go, go! Go, Johnny, go, go! Go, Johnny, go, go! Go, Johnny, go, go! Johnny be good.
This is the only place that humans have outside of planet Earth where humans can live. And if you like, down there on Earth, you can actually see it with your naked eye. You just go to the ISS website and it tells you when to see us. You can look up in the sky and you will see this bright little star moving over the sky.
Enoch chapter 18 verses 13 through 15. I saw there 7 stars like great burning mountains. And to me, when I inquired regarding them, the angel said, This place is the end of heaven and earth. This has become a prison for the stars and the host of heaven. And the stars which roll over the fire are they which have transgressed the commandment of the Lord in the beginning of their rising, because they did not come forth at their appointed times. And he was wroth with them, and bound them till the time when their guilt should be consummated, even for 10,000 years.
And here we are, 6 humans on the International Space Station, the embassy of humankind out in space, continuing an 18-year uninterrupted human presence on this fantastic laboratory. If you can look up in the sky.
whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. When they behold the beast,
you can look up in the sky and
they behold the beast.
You will see this bright little star.
They behold the beast
moving over the sky.
They behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was, and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition.
You can see that on many, many nights, and if you see it, think about that humans actually built this. That
and they that dwell on the earth shall wonder.
There are right now 6 humans, soon only 3 humans up here, out of the 7 billion humans that live down on Earth. So
when they behold the beast,
give these guys a wave when you see them.
When they behold the beast, 5 are fallen, and 1 is.
I saw in my vision by night, and behold another beast, a second, like to a bear. And it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. To this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. And I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. After this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast had also 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south, and toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. And it waxed great, even to the host of heaven. And it cast down some of the hosts and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and it waxed great, even to the host of heaven. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. Who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Remember ye not that when I was yet with you, I told you these things? And now ye know what withholdeth that he might be revealed in his time. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work, only he who now letteth will let, until he be taken out of the way. Even him, whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believed not the truth. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power. And his seat and great authority, and he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men.
Boosters. They're heading towards Earth. They're about to begin their landing burns. We'll hopefully be able to bring you nice footage of that.
Both side boosters transonic.
And watch for the landing lights deploy at the tail end of that landing burn.
That landing burn has started.
Both boosters looking to be on track towards their respective landing zones.
Landing legs have started. Side boosters' landing legs are deployed.
And deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird.
And behold, a door was opened in heaven. And the first voice which I heard was, as it were, of a trumpet talking with me, which said,
Come up hither, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter.
And immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. And he that sat was to look upon like a jasper and a sardine stone. And there was a rainbow round about the throne, in sight like unto an emerald, like a jasper and a sardine stone. And there was a rainbow round about the throne, in sight like unto an emerald, like a jasper and a sardine stone. And there was a rainbow round about the throne, in sight like unto an emerald,